Warning: this case contains mature themes involving criminal behavior and cosmic retribution. Recommended for divine personnel only. From the Celestial Observation Deck, Filing Cabinet number 47899. Karmic Justice Case, Natural Consequences Division. Subject spent 15 years committing increasingly sophisticated crimes while believing himself immune to detection or punishment. Universe has compiled comprehensive justice response. No divine intervention required. Natural law enforcement protocols fully adequate. Content warning: this case involves detailed observation of criminal behavior and ultimately fatal consequences. Filed under educational examples of cosmic justice rather than intervention records. Divine commentary: after the uplifting romance of divine dating intervention and alien plant partnerships, I received a case that reminded me why I sometimes request vacation time. Harold Wickham represented everything frustrating about certain human approaches to morality, consequences, and the assumption that intelligence equals immunity from justice. I'm filing this case not because it required intervention. Quite the opposite. Harold Wickham's story is a masterclass in how the universe's natural systems of consequence and accountability operate without any need for divine interference. Sometimes, the most powerful teaching examples are the ones where cosmic justice unfolds entirely through natural causes. Harold Wickham, 43, was a man who prided himself on being cleverer than everyone around him. He had an above-average IQ, a master's degree in accounting, and an unshakable belief that most people were too stupid to catch him doing anything he didn't want to be caught doing. This belief had served him remarkably well for 15 years. Harold's criminal career began in college when he realized he could manipulate his part-time bookkeeping job to skim small amounts that would never be noticed. His success at minor theft convinced him that he was naturally gifted at circumventing systems designed to catch dishonest people. Harold's criminal career started small and methodical. As a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm, he began with what he considered victimless crimes, adjusting client accounts by tiny amounts that would be written off as rounding errors, creating fake expense reports for amounts so small they'd never trigger audits, manipulating overtime records to add a few extra hours to his paycheck. His philosophy was simple: take small amounts from many sources rather than large amounts from few sources. Stay below audit thresholds. Never get greedy enough to attract attention. For the first 5 years, it worked perfectly. Divine commentary: Harold was correct that his methods were sophisticated enough to avoid detection by standard financial oversight. However, he failed to understand that the universe maintains its own accounting system, and cosmic justice operates on different timescales than human legal systems. Harold's success bred confidence, and confidence bred ambition. He began identifying opportunities for larger-scale manipulation. He discovered that his position gave him access to client trust accounts, corporate expense systems, and financial records that could be adjusted without triggering immediate scrutiny. He developed what he privately called the Wickham Method, a systematic approach to financial crime that involved creating multiple small theft opportunities rather than single large ones, building legitimate reputation to deflect suspicion, maintaining detailed records to avoid accidental detection through his own mistakes, never stealing from individuals directly, only from corporations and institutions. Divine commentary: Harold's method was indeed sophisticated and showed genuine understanding of how financial crime detection worked. What he didn't understand was that his meticulous record-keeping, which he considered essential for avoiding mistakes, was actually creating a comprehensive confession that would eventually surface at precisely the wrong moment. By his 6th year of successful theft, Harold had stolen approximately $2.3 million through various schemes. He'd been promoted twice, owned a house he shouldn't have been able to afford on his legitimate salary, and had developed a reputation as one of the most reliable accountants in the city. His success convinced him to expand operations. Harold began freelancing as a financial consultant for small businesses, which gave him access to dozens of additional financial systems. He developed specialized techniques for each type of organization, methods for skimming from nonprofit donations, techniques for manipulating small business payroll, systems for redirecting portions of corporate payments to accounts he controlled. He was particularly proud of his charity optimization scheme, where he would volunteer to help charitable organizations streamline their financial operations, then build in systematic skimming mechanisms that redirected small percentages of donations to accounts he'd established using fake identities. Divine commentary. Harold's expansion into charity theft marked a significant escalation in the cosmic severity of his actions. The universe's natural justice systems began compiling what could only be described as enhanced consequences for crimes that victimized vulnerable populations. By year 8, Harold was managing theft operations across 17 different organizations. His total theft had exceeded $5.8 million, and he'd never been suspected of any wrongdoing. He'd been voted Employee of the Year 3 times and had been offered partnership track positions at 2 major accounting firms. Harold interpreted his continued success as confirmation that he was simply too intelligent to be caught. Harold's assumption that intelligence alone could protect him from consequences represented a fundamental misunderstanding of how natural justice operates. The universe doesn't distinguish between intelligent and unintelligent criminals. It responds to actions and their effects on others, regardless of the perpetrator's intellectual capabilities. Harold's criminal career reached its peak during years 11 through 15. He'd refined his methods to the point where theft had become almost automated. He'd established a network of fake companies, false identities, and redirected payment systems that generated steady criminal income with minimal active management required. His legitimate career had also flourished. He'd been promoted to senior partner at his accounting firm, was frequently invited to speak at professional conferences, and had published articles on fraud prevention that were considered authoritative in the field. The irony of Harold publishing expert advice on preventing the exact types of crimes he was committing was not lost on the cosmic accounting department. The universe appeared to be allowing him enough rope to thoroughly entangle himself. During this period, Harold committed what he considered his masterpiece, a systematic theft operation targeting a foundation that provided financial assistance to families dealing with childhood cancer. His scheme redirected approximately 30% of all donations over a 3-year period to accounts he controlled, totaling nearly $1.2 million. Harold was particularly proud of this operation because it was virtually undetectable. The foundation's directors believed they were experiencing reduced donation levels due to economic factors, never realizing that donations were actually steady but being systematically diverted. He used the stolen money to purchase a vacation home, luxury cars, and expensive artwork. He traveled extensively, always paying cash to avoid creating financial trails that might raise questions about his apparent wealth. Divine commentary. Harold's theft from childhood cancer funds represented a cosmic line crossing that activated what could only be described as the universe's maximum consequence protocols. The natural justice system began implementing what I can only call precision karma, consequences calibrated to match not just the crime, but the specific cruelty involved in stealing from desperate families. By the end of year 15, Harold had stolen over $12 million from various sources. He owned properties worth $3.2 million, had luxury assets worth nearly $800,000, and maintained offshore accounts containing $4.6 million in laundered funds. He'd never been investigated, never been suspected, and never faced any consequences for his actions. Harold believed he was untouchable. Divine commentary. This was the precise moment when the universe's natural justice systems reached what could only be called critical mass. Harold had accumulated such a comprehensive catalog of theft, particularly from vulnerable populations, that the cosmic consequence equations had generated a response of proportional severity. Harold's downfall began not through investigation or discovery, but through a series of seemingly unrelated coincidences that demonstrated the universe's particular talent for ironic timing. It started when Harold volunteered to help organize the annual charity auction for the Childhood Cancer Foundation he'd been systematically robbing. He'd done this before. Maintaining visible charitable involvement helped reinforce his reputation as a trustworthy community member. Divine commentary? Harold's decision to personally volunteer for the organization he'd been victimizing represented either spectacular arrogance or cosmic-level ironic timing. The universe's justice systems appeared to have been waiting for exactly this moment. The auction planning committee included Sarah Morrison, the mother of a 7-year-old boy named Kevin, who was currently undergoing treatment for leukemia. Sarah had been trying to understand why the Foundation's assistance had been reduced over the past 3 years, forcing her family into debt to cover medical expenses that should have been covered by donations. Sarah also happened to be a forensic accountant. During the auction planning meeting, Harold made what he later realized was his first significant mistake in 15 years. He casually mentioned that he'd noticed some accounting irregularities in the Foundation's financial reports and offered to conduct a pro bono audit to help identify potential problems. Divine commentary. Harold's offer to audit his own crime scene represented the kind of overconfidence that typically precedes spectacular downfalls. The universe's timing in placing a forensic accountant directly in his path, whose child had been personally affected by his theft, suggested cosmic justice operating with mathematical precision. Sarah, desperate to understand why her family's assistance had been reduced, eagerly accepted Harold's offer. She also mentioned that she'd be happy to assist with the audit, given her professional background in forensic accounting. Harold agreed, confident that his theft methods were too sophisticated for detection, even by a specialist. Divine commentary. This moment represented what cosmic justice administrators call perfect convergence, when natural consequences align so precisely that intervention becomes unnecessary. Harold had just agreed to conduct a financial audit of his own crimes with the assistance of a forensic specialist whose child he had personally victimized. Then, Sarah approached the Foundation audit with the methodical precision that had made her one of the region's most successful forensic accountants. She was also motivated by personal desperation. Her family was facing bankruptcy due to medical expenses that Foundation assistance should have covered. Harold had prepared for the audit by creating what he believed was a perfect false trail. He'd manufactured documentation showing reduced donations, economic downturns affecting giving patterns, and increased administrative costs that would explain the Foundation's apparent financial struggles. What Harold hadn't anticipated was Sarah's particular expertise in detecting exactly the types of sophisticated theft he'd been conducting. Sarah Morrison specialized in uncovering systematic financial fraud involving multiple false identities and redirected payments. Her expertise was a perfect match for Harold's criminal methods, as if the universe had spent years preparing the ideal investigator for this specific case. Within 3 days, Sarah identified anomalies in the Foundation's payment processing that suggested systematic diversion of funds. The patterns she discovered were subtle enough to avoid standard auditing procedures, but obvious to someone trained in forensic detection. "Harold," she said during their 4th audit session, "I'm seeing some concerning patterns in the payment processing data. It looks like donations are being received, but then redirected through what appear to be shell companies before reaching the Foundation accounts." Harold maintained his helpful demeanor while internally beginning to panic. "That's odd. What kind of patterns?" Sarah showed him printouts covered with highlighted transactions, traced payment paths, and correlation analyses that mapped directly to Harold's theft operations. Someone has created a sophisticated network of false companies that intercept donation payments, skim percentages, and then forward reduced amounts to the Foundation. It's actually quite clever. The Foundation receives enough money to appear functional, while the majority gets diverted. Divine commentary. Sarah had essentially reverse-engineered Harold's entire criminal operation within 4 days. The universe's sense of ironic justice was operating at peak efficiency. Harold realized he was trapped. He could either confess or hope that Sarah's investigation wouldn't trace the theft directly to him. Given his confidence in his methods, he decided to continue the charade while secretly preparing to flee the country. "This is terrible," Harold said with practiced concern. "We need to contact the authorities immediately." "Agreed," Sarah replied. "I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're sending a team next week." Divine commentary. Harold had just agreed to call federal investigators to examine his own criminal operations. The cosmic irony was so perfect that even experienced divine observers found it remarkable. The FBI Financial Crimes team, led by Agent Maria Santos, arrived expecting a routine charity fraud case. What they discovered was one of the most sophisticated systematic theft operations in recent history. Agent Santos had seen many clever criminals, but Harold's operation impressed even experienced investigators. Whoever designed this network understands both accounting systems and human psychology, she told Sarah during their preliminary review. They've created theft mechanisms that avoid detection while maintaining the appearance of legitimate operation. Harold, still maintaining his helpful volunteer role, offered his expertise in understanding the financial systems involved. I'd be happy to help explain how these accounting processes work, he told Agent Santos. I've been working with these types of systems for 15 years. Divine commentary, Harold was now actively assisting federal investigators in understanding the criminal methods he'd developed. The universe's sense of poetic justice was operating at levels that impressed even cosmic observers. Agent Santos was particularly interested in Harold's insights. You seem to understand these theft methods very well. Have you encountered similar operations in your professional work? Unfortunately, yes, Harold replied with practiced regret. Financial crime is becoming increasingly sophisticated. The criminals are getting smarter about exploiting system weaknesses. What Harold didn't realize was that Agent Santos specialized in what the FBI called insider financial crime. Fraud committed by individuals with legitimate access to the systems being exploited. His detailed understanding of the theft methods, combined with his access to all the victimized organizations, had made him her primary suspect within 48 hours. Divine commentary, Agent Santos had identified Harold as the probable perpetrator before he realized he was under suspicion. The universe had provided him with enough rope to thoroughly hang himself, and he was enthusiastically tying the knots. By the end of week 2, Agent Santos had traced Harold's false identities, located his offshore accounts, and documented his systematic theft from 17 different organizations. She'd also discovered his masterpiece theft from the Childhood Cancer Foundation, the operation that had directly impacted Sarah Morrison's family. The evidence was overwhelming, methodically documented, and ironically provided partly by Harold's own helpful explanations of how such sophisticated crimes might be conducted. Divine commentary, Harold had become the most cooperative target in federal financial crime history, essentially conducting his own prosecution while believing he was maintaining his cover. Agent Santos arranged what she called a final consultation meeting with all the audit participants. Harold arrived expecting to help finalize the investigation report. Instead, he found himself facing a room full of federal agents, forensic accountants, and evidence displays mapping 15 years of his criminal activity. Harold Wickham, Agent Santos announced, you're under arrest for systematic financial fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and theft from charitable organizations. Harold's first reaction was disbelief. His methods had been perfect. His false identities were sophisticated. His money laundering operations were virtually undetectable. There was no way they could have traced everything back to him so quickly. I think there's been a mistake, Harold said, still clinging to his helpful volunteer persona. I'm here to assist with the investigation, not, you've been assisting with the investigation, Agent Santos replied. In fact, you've provided some of our best evidence. Did you know that every time you explained how these theft methods worked, you demonstrated knowledge that only the person who designed them could possess? Divine commentary. Harold had spent 3 weeks providing federal investigators with detailed tutorials on his own criminal methods. The cosmic irony was so complete that it seemed choreographed. Sarah Morrison stepped forward. Harold, the money you stole from the Childhood Cancer Foundation, that was money that could have helped my son. Families like mine have gone into debt, lost homes, couldn't afford treatment because you decided you were entitled to money donated to help sick children. For the first time in 15 years, Harold found himself face to face with the actual human consequences of his crimes. Sarah's 7-year-old son was fighting for his life, partly because Harold had stolen the money that should have provided their medical assistance. Divine commentary. This moment represented what cosmic justice calls perfect accountability, when consequences manifest not as abstract punishment, but as direct confrontation with the actual human suffering caused by criminal actions. Harold's carefully constructed self-image as a victimless criminal collapsed instantly. He wasn't a clever operator exploiting faceless institutions. He was someone who had stolen from desperate families, dealing with childhood cancer. The universe's accounting had come due. Harold's arrest was only the beginning of what could only be described as comprehensively karmic consequences. As if the universe had been carefully calibrating justice for 15 years, everything began unraveling with mathematical precision. Within 24 hours of his arrest, Harold developed what doctors initially diagnosed as stress-induced symptoms: severe stomach pain, difficulty sleeping, and what appeared to be early signs of an autoimmune disorder. Divine commentary. Harold's physical symptoms were manifesting exactly as his stolen medical foundation funds should have been helping other families. The universe's sense of proportional consequences was operating with clinical precision. During his first week in federal custody, Harold's symptoms worsened rapidly. The autoimmune condition proved to be an extremely rare disorder that attacked the nervous system, causing progressive loss of motor function and cognitive ability. Medical specialists were baffled by the condition's sudden onset and rapid progression. Dr. Emily Chen, the neurologist assigned to Harold's case, noted that the symptoms appeared to specifically target the areas of brain function associated with complex planning and manipulation, exactly the cognitive abilities Harold had used for 15 years of criminal activity. Divine commentary. The universe appeared to be systematically removing Harold's capacity for the specific intellectual functions he'd used to victimize others. The precision was remarkable, even by cosmic justice standards. Harold's legal situation deteriorated equally rapidly. His comprehensive record-keeping, which he'd considered essential for avoiding mistakes, provided federal prosecutors with perfect documentation of every crime he'd committed. His offshore accounts were frozen, his properties were seized, and his assets were liquidated to provide restitution to his victims. The Childhood Cancer Foundation alone was awarded $3.2 million in damages, funds that would be used to provide medical assistance to families like the Morrisons. Harold's meticulous criminal records had become perfect evidence for his prosecution. The same organizational skills that made him a successful thief made his conviction inevitable. 6 months after his arrest, Harold Wickham was dying in a federal medical facility, his rare autoimmune condition having progressed beyond treatment. The same cognitive abilities he'd once been so proud of were failing systematically, leaving him unable to understand complex concepts or plan beyond immediate needs. Sarah Morrison visited him during his final weeks, not out of forgiveness, but to deliver a message from the families he'd victimized. The foundation was able to restore full medical assistance programs with the restitution money, she told Harold, who was struggling to follow the conversation due to his cognitive deterioration. "My son Kevin is responding well to treatment now. Dozens of other children are getting the help they need because the money you stole has been returned." Harold tried to respond, but the neurological damage made communication difficult. The man who had once prided himself on intellectual superiority could barely form coherent sentences. Divine commentary. Harold was experiencing the loss of the very capabilities he'd used to harm others, while simultaneously learning that his victims were being healed through the restoration of what he'd stolen. The universe's sense of poetic justice was operating at levels that impressed even experienced cosmic observers. Sarah continued, "The doctors say your condition is so rare that there's no treatment protocol. It affects maybe 1 person in 50 million. But here's what I find interesting. The Medical Research Foundation you stole from has been working on treatments for exactly this type of autoimmune disorder. If you hadn't stolen their funding, they might have developed treatments that could have helped you." Divine commentary. Harold was dying from a condition that might have been treatable if he hadn't stolen from the Medical Research Foundation working on that exact disease. The universe's sense of ironic consequence had achieved perfect mathematical precision. Harold died 7 months after his arrest, having lost not only his freedom and wealth, but the very intellectual capabilities he'd once considered proof of his superiority. His death was quiet, largely unnoticed, and completely opposite to the grandiose lifestyle he'd built through 15 years of theft. The final tally of consequences included complete asset forfeiture, $8.7 million returned to victims, federal conviction on 47 counts of financial fraud, restitution payments that fully restored all charitable programs he damaged, Personal dissolution of every advantage he'd gained through criminal activity. Physical and cognitive deterioration that removed his capacity for future harm. Death that went unmourned and unremembered. Divine commentary. Harold's case represents one of the most comprehensively resolved examples of natural karmic justice in my observation records. No divine intervention was required. The universe's own systems of consequence and accountability operated with perfect precision. While Harold's consequences were unfolding, his victims were experiencing what could only be called cosmic restitution. The money recovered from his criminal operations was distributed to the organizations and individuals he'd victimized, often with interest that exceeded the original stolen amounts. The Childhood Cancer Foundation not only recovered all stolen funds, but received additional federal grants triggered by the high-profile nature of the case. Their assistance programs expanded beyond previous levels, helping more families than ever before. Sarah Morrison's son Kevin made a full recovery, aided by treatments funded by the restored foundation money. The Morrison family, instead of facing bankruptcy, found their medical expenses fully covered with additional support for recovery costs. Divine commentary. The universe's justice systems don't only punish wrongdoing, they actively work to restore what was damaged. Harold's victims didn't just recover what was stolen. They often found themselves better supported than they would have been without the crime occurring. The 17 organizations Harold had victimized used the restitution money to strengthen their financial oversight systems, implement better fraud prevention, and expand their charitable programs. His criminal activity had inadvertently led to improvements in nonprofit financial security across the entire region. Several families who had lost homes or faced bankruptcy due to Harold's theft found themselves not only restored to their previous financial positions, but better protected against future financial emergencies through improved foundation assistance programs. Harold's comprehensive criminal operation had triggered equally comprehensive restorative justice. The universe appeared to use his restitution payments as seed money for expanding charitable operations beyond what they could have achieved without the intervention. Harold Wickham's case provided clear documentation of how the universe's natural justice systems operate when left to function without divine interference. Several principles emerged from observation. Precision timing. Natural consequences unfold according to their own timeline, often appearing delayed, but ultimately manifesting at moments of maximum impact and irony. Proportional response. The severity of natural consequences correlates directly with the harm caused, particularly when victims are vulnerable populations. Systematic restoration. Universal justice systems don't only punish wrongdoing, they actively work to restore victims and strengthen systems against future harm. Perfect irony. Natural consequences often manifest through the exact methods or systems that perpetrators use to harm others. Comprehensive resolution. True karmic justice addresses not only punishment, but restoration, prevention, and education for all affected parties. Divine commentary. Harold's case demonstrates that sophisticated intelligence without moral wisdom simply creates more elaborate methods for self-destruction. The universe's justice systems are far more sophisticated than any criminal operation, and they operate with perfect patience until the moment for consequences arrives. Harold had spent 15 years believing that intelligence could protect him from accountability. He created elaborate systems for exploiting human vulnerability while maintaining his reputation as a trustworthy professional. What he'd never understood was that the universe maintains its own books, and cosmic accounting operates with precision that makes human financial systems look primitive by comparison. The ultimate lesson of Harold Wickham's case: the universe doesn't prevent humans from choosing evil, but it maintains perfect records, and payment is always collected with interest calculated across the full spectrum of harm caused. Divine commentary. Sometimes the most powerful examples of cosmic justice are the ones that require no divine intervention, just the natural unfolding of consequences that were set in motion the moment someone decided that their desires mattered more than other people's welfare. Harold Wickham's case has been filed as a teaching example in the Cosmic Justice Academy, where it's used to demonstrate how natural karmic systems operate with mathematical precision. His story serves as both warning and reassurance. The universe may allow temporary success in harmful activities, but it maintains comprehensive records and ensures that all accounts are eventually balanced. The families Harold victimized have not only recovered, but thrived. The organizations he damaged have strengthened their operations and expanded their charitable reach. The systems he exploited have been improved to prevent similar crimes. Even in death, Harold's actions continue to generate positive consequences for his former victims. Next case, a woman who accidentally created a time loop while trying to perfect her morning routine, and the increasingly surreal breakfast scenarios that resulted when Tuesday, March 15th, refused to end. Note to self: after observing 15 years of systematic criminal behavior, followed by comprehensive karmic justice, I definitely need that vacation. The time loop case should be considerably less emotionally exhausting, assuming temporal paradoxes don't give me a cosmic headache. Paragraph. End of official report. P.S. The universe's natural justice systems operated so efficiently in Harold's case that the Cosmic Justice Department has designated it as a perfect resolution example. No divine intervention was required. All victims were restored to better conditions than before the crimes occurred, and the perpetrator faced consequences that were both proportional to his actions and prevented any possibility of future harm. Sometimes the most beautiful justice is the kind that unfolds entirely through natural law.